No doubt about it, the lawsuit and settlements are going to have a massive impact on your future marketing, what it looks like and what it sounds like. And so today's video is dedicated to the messaging of that future marketing. Welcome to This Week in Marketing. My name is Jason Pantana, and I'm so glad you're tuned in today. If you're new to the channel, it would mean a ton if you would please tap that big red subscribe button so that you get alerted whenever we publish new videos just like this. While I am thrilled you're here for this one video, I would love to connect with you on all future videos so that together we can work on leveling up your marketing, beginning with today's conversation. This is a critical conversation. You would had to have been hiding under a rock if you haven't been hearing about the settlements and the lawsuits and the imposed likely changes to be coming down the line in the real estate space. And in today's video, we're going to take that head on. I have a special guest who's going to join me to help me have that conversation, none other than Marc Davison. Marc is the co-founder of 1000 Watt, and he is one of the most introspective, insightful, thoughtful people I've ever encountered. I got to tell you, I met Marc. I was at an event that he was speaking at with Ferry, and out of the blue, out of nowhere, I had never met Marc, and I only knew of Marc by reputation because he's a very respected thought leader in our space, marketing, branding, and so forth. Ferry says, Jason, why don't you come up and debate Marc on this topic? And I was like, okay. So I came up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to debate Marc Davison, who is brilliant. He's brilliant. And I did happen to have in that specific item of marketing, we had different perspectives. And that's all they were, was different perspectives. And what I found in that conversation was not a debate at all. I found a respected colleague, a peer, somebody who is so insightful and who thinks very deeply about every aspect of marketing and branding and what are you building over time. And it is that level of thoughtfulness that is absolutely needed right now. And it is that level of thoughtfulness that is absolutely needed right now as we talk about your value proposition. What is your value proposition with buyers, with sellers? How do you articulate it in your marketing, in your emails, in your videos, in your social media? How are you describing? How are you cultivating? How are you eliciting a sense of value? Perceived value, where sellers think, oh wow, I can perceive the value. Buyers think I can see the value. Versus just going off and saying, I do this, 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 and this for you. I think a lot of agents are busy. And I don't mean any disrespect about this. They're busy, and when was the last time, I wonder, you really sat back to think about, hey, what is my value proposition? Because if you aren't clear about it, then it's very, very likely that you are putting something out into the marketplace that may not be the truest reflection of your value to buyers and sellers. And so with that in mind, today's conversation may be the perfect interruption, that moment to really give thought to, hey, in the wake of everything that's happening with the lawsuit, how am I going to leverage this moment in time to craft a value? No doubt about it, the lawsuit and settlements are going to have a massive impact on your future marketing, what it looks like and what it sounds like. And so today's video is dedicated to the messaging of that future marketing. Welcome to This Week in Marketing. My name is Jason Pantana, and I'm so glad you're tuned in today. If you're new to the channel, it would mean a ton if you would please tap that big red subscribe button so that you get alerted whenever we publish new videos just like this. While I am thrilled you're here for this one video, I would love to connect with you on all future videos so that together we can work on leveling up your marketing, beginning with today's conversation. This is a critical conversation. You would had to have been hiding under a rock if you haven't been hearing about the settlements and the lawsuits and the imposed likely changes to be coming down the line in the real estate space. And in today's video, we're going to take that head on. I have a special guest who's going to join me to help me have that conversation, none other than Marc Davison. Marc is the co-founder of 1000 Watt, and he is one of the most introspective, insightful, thoughtful people I've ever encountered. I got to tell you, I met Marc. I was at an event that he was speaking at with Ferry, and out of the blue, out of nowhere, I had never met Marc, and I only knew of Marc by reputation because he's a very respected thought leader in our space, marketing, branding, and so forth. Ferry says, Jason, why don't you come up and debate Marc on this topic? And I was like, okay. So I came up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to debate Marc Davison, who is brilliant. He's brilliant. And I did happen to have in that specific item of marketing, we had different perspectives. And that's all they were, was different perspectives. And what I found in that conversation was not a debate at all. I found a respected colleague, a peer, somebody who is so insightful and who thinks very deeply about every aspect of marketing and branding and what are you building over time. And it is that level of thoughtfulness that is absolutely needed right now. And it is that level of thoughtfulness that is absolutely needed right now as we talk about your value proposition. What is your value proposition with buyers, with sellers? How do you articulate it in your marketing, in your emails, in your videos, in your social media? How are you describing? How are you cultivating? How are you eliciting a sense of value? Perceived value, where sellers think, oh wow, I can perceive the value. Buyers think I can see the value, versus just going off and saying, I do this, 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 and this for you. I think a lot of agents are busy, and I don't mean any disrespect about this. They're busy, and when was the last time, I wonder, you really sat back to think about, hey, what is my value proposition? Because if you aren't clear about it, then it's very, very likely that you are putting something out into the marketplace that may not be the truest reflection of your value to buyers and sellers. And so with that in mind, today's conversation may be the perfect interruption, that moment to really give thought to, hey, in the wake of everything that's happening with the lawsuit, how am I going to leverage this moment in time to craft a value proposition that so carefully aligns with today's buyer in my marketplace, today's seller in my marketplace, and it attracts people to want to work with me in a way beyond ever before? This conversation is going to be a dense conversation. It's going to make you think it's likely a long conversation. And my encouragement is that you stick around for the long haul, because when you think about what you say, knowing that what you say matters, it's going to have ripple effect consequences in every email, every video, every aspect of your marketing mix. Your marketing is ultimately the delivery mechanism of your messaging, and that messaging is predicated on your value. So let's dive into my interview with Marc Davison talking about your value proposition. Man, I am so excited for this conversation. Marc Davison, I've already talked you up in the intro, but I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be a conversation that every agent, anybody who's paying attention right now to what's happening with settlements and lawsuits and how they want to be able to talk to the consumer in a way that moves forward and doesn't get stuck, I think this is going to be a critical conversation. But just thanks for being here today, Marc.
Well, this has been sitting in my calendar for a couple of weeks with a little bit of an intimidation factor. I had to go and do a little research, study up, sharpen my stuff. Because I watch you daily. I follow you everywhere. I know what you're tracking on. You know stuff I don't. So I needed to get ready for this, and I'm glad we're finally here.
Well, the feeling's mutual. I got ready for this one too, and I think we're going to be talking for a while. I think it's going to be a big conversation. So I want to set the tone. We're here to talk today about value propositions and how do you articulate a value proposition. So I thought it'd be useful as a baseline if I simply read Webster's definition, tried to debate him, of what is a value prop. And Webster says a value proposition refers to the benefit. I'm reading my screen over here. A benefit promised by a seller to a buyer or a market, which highlights the value of the product or service offered. I'm curious, from a real estate perspective, an agent's point of view, how would you articulate or describe or define a value proposition?
I would say that it's Webster. Like, how do you disagree with Webster?
How do you?
Yeah. But okay, there is yes, that is accurate. But it's probably not like conversational definition. So the conversational definition is, okay, your value proposition really is, and this is the nuance to it, it's the thing that you own that differentiates what you have from somebody else's version of that same thing. So, think about, I don't know, there's so many different category examples, but something I recently found myself doing is I was at Home Depot buying some stuff for my house. And I chose, you got this brand, that brand. These are powerful brands within there. You got Still, you got Milwaukee, you got Black & Decker. How do you make a choice? Well, this price can be a value definition, a value proposition. They're cheaper than them. That's the differentiation. But when all things are being equal, then the value proposition becomes the thing you're associating to that category or that product or that service that is different, that you relate to. And it's the heart of, and it's the sum total of branding. So you'll notice if you ever do like a branding exercise, there may be a segment within the long litany of things you get, like mission, vision, purpose, promise, blah, 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 blah. There'll be something called value proposition.
Right.
Really, in truth, it is the sum total of everything. It's everything clocking together to create the one little thing that people go, you know what, that makes this different. And I relate to that difference. And that's what I want. And I value that.
It's funny. I think about the Bain study. Bain did a study on the 30 elements of value. And in their study, they revealed there's only 30 different ways a customer of a buyer of a product or a service, whatever it is, can experience the feeling of value in working with somebody. And they said that, hey, companies that can actually register on 4 out of the 30 elements have significant better ROI.
Yeah.
But I think it's proof, I'm not going to get into all the nitty gritty of that study, but I think it's proof that it is the sum total of the varying itemized aspects of your value proposition that make up why someone wants to work with you and what that differentiation piece is to why they want to work with you. So I wrote down, I love what you said a second ago when you kicked this off. You said, well, that's a Webster's definition of a value prop, but not necessarily a conversational definition of a value prop. And I was thinking about this too, that I see a lot of folks talking about their value proposition as if somebody's agreed to read a bulleted list of, we'll do this, 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 and this for you, and we'll do this, 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 and this. And like, that's not, you can't filibuster your way into making somebody believe you're valuable. And so when you said the word conversational, I just went, oh, aha. How do you converse about your value proposition? What does that look like? And I'm struggling to even make a tangible question, but I'm not sure what you meant by the word conversational.
You can't, well, I just wanted to, yeah, good. I just wanted to provide a more conversational expression of a definition, but like you're now getting to an interesting point. You can't talk, if you have to talk somebody through your value proposition, you don't have a value proposition.
You know who made me think about that, Mark?
What's that?
You. I said, you know who made me think about that? It was you. In a text message, you said something where I was like, values perceived, but please continue your thought.
Well, like, look, we all know you go shopping, you're walking down the supermarket aisle. There's no, the salespeople aren't standing. You don't have the craft salespeople standing in front of the bird's eye salespeople. The value proposition has already been baked in through like messaging and marketing. But what influences messaging and marketing? It is all the ingredients. So you look at a package, and on the package there are a list of ingredients. Most people don't buy lists of ingredients unless you're health crazy like I am. You simply buying, I want mac and cheese. And right. So I'm buying craft because I believe in craft. So nobody is really looking through that bullet list of ingredients, but you need those ingredients to make the final product.
Well, and I would also say that the stakes start to add up. So for example, you go back to your Home Depot metaphor of, do I want to use Milwaukee or Ryobi, or do I want to use Black & Decker? And, I may have a pretty primitive point of view about, well, I'm going to stick with Ryobi because I already have some of their tools. And that could have been your basis for why you stick with it. Or it could be, I like the color red, so I'm going to choose, I think Milwaukee is red and black or whatever it is. So I'm going to choose those tools. But it's low stakes. But when you get to high stakes situations, you're going to have a lot more thinking that goes into why you're choosing to align with this professional over that professional.
Value proposition actually is communicated through color. If you look at the Black & Decker, all right, let's just take a moment and break it down. I did not choose Black & Decker because in my mind, Black & Decker is kind of like the cheaper homeowner, do-it-yourself, cheap brand. And
Okay.
their color palette suggests that.
Huh.
I elevated up into a higher price point, knowing nothing about chainsaws. I never turned one on. I never cut anything down before. And when you look at their branding, when you look at their identity, when you look at their logo, it suggested more professional. It suggested higher end. Color, there's science to color. There's science to fonts. Words, it all is part of it's all the ingredients, and the ingredients have to broadcast through messaging, marketing, and identity and packaging. And think about this. You look at an Air Jordan, it's the same freaking sneaker as a Nike, but man, it's packaged differently. Yeah. And that packaging is suggesting the value proposition. It's a better, more collectible item, and it looks that way.
What do you think are some of the impacts or inferences one could draw? Like, if we're having this conversation about products and goods, how would you carry that thinking into services, like a real estate professional?
Yeah, I was just gonna. Great, you read my mind. It's a little bit more complicated when you're a professional selling a service, um, because your service, depending on the service, it's a little bit less tangible. And you can buy a product, take it off the shelf, hold on to it. You can feel it. When you're a service provider, it raises the stakes completely, and you can't necessarily use the same strategies that a product. However, there are some you can. You know, in a world where a realtor, let's use that because that's our audience,
Yeah.
doesn't while a realtor has the platform in which to orally, verbally, visually, through video, communicate value, they have to do it with a lot of words. Um, and that's a lot to ask for a customer to like track through all to really come back and go, wow, I think I understand the value proposition. So what a realtor has to use, a service provider has, are, the best things in the world, which are like, let's start with visuals. If your identity and your logo and all the things we kind of just go, woo woo stuff, it's creative. I'm a left brain. I can't think that way. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, like a good looking, sharp, specialized identity broadcasts value in ways that like uh, you don't realize it until you do it, and then you go, "Oh
Right.
my." People, I put this beautiful sign in front of this beautiful home, and now people are calling me about my sign, or they have an expectation of me based upon. So with service, you have to do it through things that are like have the least obstacles in
Mm.
which the consumer has to climb through to get to understand and feel your value prop. Um, and like we can get into the details of what some folks use that are likely the wrong mechanisms
Well,
versus the
you read my mind. So, if I could paraphrase what I'm hearing so far, because my brain is thinking, okay, so let's get tangible. What are some of those elements that a service provider would need to kind of look at because they don't have the same advantage of it's and
yeah
I hear you. It is like your fonts and your colors and that stuff. You cannot just bulldoze over that and act like it doesn't matter because it's every little detail about what you put into the marketplace causes a reaction. In the pre-show before we turn the recording on, we were talking about for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Everything you do matters. And it's not to be said with the intent of, I don't want you to trip over your own feet because you're so paralyzed by, I don't know how to make a decision about anything. Even if my fonts matter, I can understand how that could be debilitating in terms of moving forward. Yet at the same time, I think it's really important to have a conversation about value and what is it and how do you want to be perceived so that you can move forward in confidence. Anyways, I was going to ask you next, what are some of the ways you see this getting messed up in our space? Where are agents potentially missing the mark when it comes to how they are communicating their value proposition or a lack thereof, perhaps?
I want to answer this. I want to give two answers to this. The first way I want to go is to provide the audience maybe an instrument by which they can measure that on their own. Okay. If you actually, if you as a business took a step back and looked at your documentation, and if you don't have any of this documentation, then you're
Mhm.
really, then there's your answer first off
Yeah.
right there. You're broadcasting, you have no script in which to broadcast off of. But like you got to look at some of the elements that make up brand DNA. Is there a brand? Do you have a vision for your business, a vision for the world? Is there a somebody to do it for them? We
They need
could
a
do it.
spokesperson.
Well, yeah, it needs a spokesperson. It needs a guardian.
Yep.
Uh, so, like, I would then take those attributes and I would match that attribute up with a vocabulary list. Like, what's your lexicon? What's your brand? What are your brand words that you like to use and don't use? What would you say? What would you never say? I would then also examine because things like open minded and elegant, um, opinionated are things you can design. What is a typeface that has those attributes? What is a color palette that has those attributes? So by
Mm.
understanding what your attributes are, by understanding what your attitude is by understanding whether you are, and then doing sort of like a temperament exercise, which are you warm or are you cold? Are you sophisticated or are you casual? Are you luxurious or are you laid back? Like you come up with like a temperature gauge of where on this chart of temperaments you are, because that allows you to dial in hue and tone. That's where you go from like, because there's primary colors, there's primary fonts, but then there's million. Let's look at a Pantone chart. There's red, and then there's like a million different variations of red. Which
Right.
red, which combination of color is it? So, like, if a brand, an agent, a service, whatever, isn't doing any of that, then they're just out there willy nilly putting out whatever feels good in the moment, and there's no continuity. And in the lack of any continuity, there's no value proposition because there's nothing for anybody looking at that to like stand on and go, well, that's what they stand for. That's what they're about. That's what their value proposition is.
I
So
got
I
to interject for a moment because I suspect there are people who are listening or watching now who have come to expect on this show tactics, 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 tactics. But tactics without strategy is a waste. Leaping before you look to me is a waste. And so I would say to anybody who's listening right now and maybe wondering, is it really worth it to go through this kind of an internal exercise before externally communicating through all your different marketing channels about your brand and your business and what you are and who you're for? I would give my thought to say it's absolutely mission critical. Otherwise, you're just leaping into action without any kind of forethought to where you're going or who you're going there for and who you are and who you aren't. And you're going to have an uncontrolled response in terms of not knowing what to predict or expect based upon your marketing. That's thoughtless marketing. What else would you say? So some of the exercises. Go ahead.
uh, you served me up a softball.
Sure did.
You could do all that. You can go full on tactic. You don't have to do any of the strategy. Yes, it is mission critical if you are trying to build a brand.
Mm.
If you're trying to build a brand and you don't do this, you will not build a brand. I don't care what you think. I don't care what anybody tells you. If you don't do the strategy and base the tactic off the strategy, think about like how would a football team ever make its way to the goal line if it doesn't have an action plan?
Right.
It needs a strategic plan where the team, I don't play football, so I don't know all the right words, but like without having a plan, without going into a huddle and going, this is what we're going to do, how would anybody know what to do?
Right.
So it's okay if you don't have a brand. It's okay if you think you have a brand and you don't have a brand. But just know this, without it, you are then the can of beer in the beer aisle that has to have a salesperson standing in front of it to sell it all day long with its bullet points.
Mm.
With the strategy and with the tactical plan that executes on the strategy, you become a brand, and then you don't need the sale. The brand sells for you. Okay, that I needed to say.
So I have two thoughts. My first thought is I was giving a speech a couple weeks ago, and I had an opening line of thought, and it was a speech about generating seller leads. And I made a comment, and I said, and I was trying to create a dichotomy in the comment I made. I said, buyer leads are captured, seller leads are cultivated. And the effect I was trying to create was, you can go buy and purchase buyer leads. There has been figured out many times over mechanisms from a marketing lead capture standpoint to go get people who are looking for houses and then sell them off for buyer leads, which is fine. If you're an effective salesperson, you'll have great conversations, you'll build rapport, you'll convert. I'm not downing it one bit per se, but I was there to make a specific point to say when it comes to seller leads, you'll find that some of those same tactics do not hold water in that context because, with buyer leads, if they don't like this home, you just show them that home or that home or that home or that home. And eventually they're going to like one of them. And so the nurture is built into it by default. With sellers, you can't just keep saying your home is worth this today, tomorrow it's worth that, and then the next day and the next day. Eventually that little trick's going to get old. And so the only way you can really attract consideration is through establishing positioning channels that get the seller to think, I need you. I relate to you. I want to work with you. So I think when you specifically start looking at it through the lens of what you know to be internally true about sellers, just for as an example, that they are attracted to want to do business with you by large, then you start to think, well, maybe what I do say matters. Maybe my value proposition and the way I'm, whether knowing it or not knowing it, communicating that value proposition is having a sizable impact, because I think your point was huge. Um, if you want to have a salesperson selling your beer at every shopping store you're in, metaphorically speaking, fine. But if you want your beer to sell itself effectively, then that requires a brand. Is that more or less the point you're making?
It requires a brand. It requires a strategy. And so, what is brand strategy?
Mm,
It's simply it's a framework.
yeah.
It is a foundational framework of ingredients that, when they are in sync and figured out, the end result becomes your value proposition.
Mm,
That is vision, mission, purpose, promise, point of clarity, positioning, having the brand archetype, the personality trait, all the DNA of the brand. If you think about what makes a perfect home, what makes a
yeah.
perfect home is the foundation, it's the walls, it's the enclosure. Uh, it is all the equipment inside of the home, the HVAC system and all, and then there is like the element that really takes it to the very top, which is the interior design, how it looks,
Which is,
how comfortable it is. You can't have a brand unless you have all of the elements of its framework
mm,
strategically built out. And once it's all built out, here's what happens. The brand now knows what it is. The brand is telling you what it is. Your job as the brand owner, founder, or member of a team who works for the brand, your job is to evangelize for it, protect
mm.
it, guard it, and utilize it in your things. So, like, what's special about it? Again, what is special about a brand? Like, what is special about, I mean, name me a brand. Pick a brand, and I'll probably be able to tell you what its things are.
I'm looking around my office right now. Let's just say Jeep. That's not
Jeep.
in my office, but it just came to my mind. Jeep.
So, when you think about Jeep, when you think Jeep, you don't think car. You likely think rugged, off road, military. Like it takes you to territories. Okay, I call those territories points of clarity. It knows that it's more. It can't be just a car because
Right?
there's a lot of cars, so it needs to own a territory. The Jeep is. You look at its commercials. It's rugged. It's climbing over rocks. Um, it's like the kind of car you can buy and take outdoors and go off road, and not like a Range Rover. Not freak out that you're going to break it and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg and another arm and another leg to fix it.
Right.
So it lives in that environment.
Yeah.
And then, based on that strategy of getting me to think about how I categorize it, it then messages and markets alongside that. So when you look at Jeep ads, you see the Jeep running around off road, climbing up rocks, climbing up mountains.
Yep.
Um, and that is a consistent story arc from brand strategy all the way out into then the world kind of when the world sees that. So I can take this into a real estate context.
Yeah. Bring it on.
If you're a real estate agent and you tell me that like the home is sacred, my
Mm,
listings are sacred, uh, I love what I do, I would then go to you and say, well, then why would it say for sale on your yard sign, and why would it say listed by, which is a generic term that every other agent uses? Listed by doesn't tell me how sacred that seller is and how much you love real estate and how much you love the home. This really takes examining every little thing. So an agent might go, well, then what would it say? Well, I would say, I don't know. I would need to really dissect you to know what your terminology would be. But how about we just start with home represented by?
mm.
Because now your what you've just told me is homes are sacred. The home is the most important. I keep hearing the word
You're
home.
keeping guard over it as representing it.
Yeah. So why are you using the word? The word listing is as obnoxious of a public term as the word SKU. Home Depot doesn't sell SKUs. Yeah, the internal product buyer buys SKUs. Realtors deal in listings as it relates internally with the MLS. But why is that? That's not a public word. People don't wake up the dream of owning a listing. No, nobody calls a realtor and goes, "I need you to sell my listing." So why are you, what is just listed? Why are you saying just listed? Why would you have a postcard that says just sold? It's then you're making the story all about the sold and not about like
Not about the
what
home. It's not sacred.
or what you did to market. Like, what if it said what we did to make that sale happen? It's so like what I'm saying is when there's a strategy and that strategy results in brand clarity,
Yep.
you then have the plan in which to go out and tactily and tactfully articulate the brand's vibe in a way that the public will sense it and feel it. And there's a million ways to do that. And it's some of it's science, some of it is very creative. Um, but like this is Jason, why I've always said, like when you're focused on yourself and all you're doing is selling you and building your personal brand, it's not coming from a strategy and it's not telling the customer anything the customer needs to hear. That and this is the other really really critical component of brand strategy. You need to know your primary customer. You need to understand like what they feel, what they desire, what they need. Like the thing about Jeep is if you drive a Jeep, it knows you. And so when it markets, you don't know anything about, you don't know who owns Jeep. You don't know who the CEO is of Jeep, nor do you care. Uh, you're looking at that vehicle and going, that thing speaks to me. I can see myself in it. What a real estate agent or team or anything, if they can create an environment where I can see myself, the benefits of me told through that brand storytelling, then yes, I definitely want to know who's behind it. But if that person behind it is the thing that's up front all the time, I never get to even see myself within any of that storytelling.
All right. So,
Uh,
Mark,
right.
I want to transition to what
Go.
everybody's talking about right now. Because what you're saying, I just love it. I didn't mean, hopefully I didn't cut your thought off too deeply.
No, no,
But I
no.
want to know,
Not clear.
I would love to know, with all the lawsuit talk and all the impact of the lawsuit happening in our space right now, what's the opportunity in front of today's real estate agent to really address value proposition? And what are your remarks and takeaways with what's happening in the space right now?
Okay. Uh, I think, I'm probably not alone in realizing that the very quick to judgment jury verdict was a real indication that the public doesn't really understand the value proposition of real estate. It has formed opinions and that are just so antagonistic to reality. And I'll give you one example. I don't know why anybody thinks that the seller pays the real estate commission. It's the buyer. The buyer is footing the bill for everything. It's all coming out of whatever money the buyer has just written a check for. That's how everybody gets paid. And no one knows that. No one understands that. The entire reality of real estate has been uh, completely, it's just been left untold. So the public is left to form opinions.
Mm.
And, when you look at when you do what you do and when you do what I do, you're looking at what the world of real estate is doing and you realize the messaging it's telling the world uh, is probably led up to this sensibility that there's not that much value there. Um, so what do you do? Okay, well, you should acknowledge that maybe all the things that I've been doing might be contributing to that story of stereotype, to that story of we're not really worth. Um, the last thing you want to do is you want to go and defend that publicly.
Mm.
You got to back off. Now, where you can learn some lessons is so this is interesting because behind the scenes, you and I, we know each other. We know Jimmy Mackin, we know Tom Ferry, we know a bunch of really cool, smart people. And within a matter of moments, Jimmy and I think I sent Jimmy a text and he sent me back a text. And the next thing we knew, we were sending each other press releases from brands over the last 30 years that were managing public relations crises.
Right. I remember we had a group text, all four of us, at one point about that.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe you were, oh, so maybe you were
I
on
was on
that.
it. Yeah, I was on it.
Yeah, because all right, I remember now, and you were contributing too. So like, step one is you go and look at like how has other people grappled with a moment in time where like the world has gotten a different sense of what we're about. You have to manage it, and so like the last thing you want to do is go and defend yourself to a bunch of people that aren't really loving you right now. Uh,
Touche.
my advice was maybe this is a moment in time where the wind blown hair, fully decked out in high heels and flowy dress, walking around the city with the camera and your arms flailing. Like maybe it's time to pull back on that. Don't be the target. Don't like exemplify the very thing the public is saying they don't appreciate. So my advice was step back, get out of the limelight, take a picture off of stuff, slow down on your social media, get focused because like if the world is not valuing you based on all these things you've been doing, course correct. And the next thing you need to do, which is the basis of this conversation, is start to figure out what the value prop is and change the narrative.
I would also chime in and say, if you look at social media, for instance, and you talk about value prop, there is sometimes a sacrificial loss of short term gains for long term gains. And what I am thinking of in my mind there is no doubt that social proof has a powerful impact in terms of generating business. The fact is, when you showcase yourself as to use your favorite word, listing agent, when you showcase yourself as the listing agent, it certainly creates a sense of, oh, they're doing that, they're succeeding in that. And so when it comes time to get hired, you can generate business from social proof. But I've often used the analogy that social proof is like the salt and the cookie batter recipe. It
Hmm.
only takes a little bit. If you put
Yep.
too much in there, it's going to gag you.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
I think that there's sometimes a feeling of too much social proof because we know that it works, but too much of it starts to impede long-term potential and does long-term damage on your brand. And so I think to your point, there needs to be an element of not being tone deaf to what's the sentiment right now. And sometimes some social proof could come across as playing into the narrative right now. And one needs to be intelligent and strategic in terms of how they're going to go about doing that.
Really
Two,
smart.
I think there's also an element of thinking, well, what am I playing for in the long game right now? Who am I really for? And if you have a value proposition that goes or a brand that anchors back to those key points about your attributes, your attitude, understanding your audience, and those key points, it should be a lot easier for you to reflect back and say, well, what's needed of me today? What needs to be communicated to me today? And, just to offer some kind of an answer to that, I might think about if I was creating videos and content for social media, for instance, or sending out emails,
Hmm.
I would think more strategically about better stories that make the hero of the story the customer. I would think about examples of how can I share insight or knowledge that can help somebody make a better decision for themselves. But it goes back to what you said. I can't remember if you said it during the call or during the pre-call when we were chatting about it's not about you, it's about your customer, and the customer doesn't want to make it about themselves. That's some of
I
my
want
feelings.
to best leverage your brand and your platform. I think like if I can drop a couple of tactics that
Please.
lend credibility. So, and I'll use low hanging fruit stuff. A just sold postcard um, with a price is very transactional.
Very.
This sold for this much money, and
Yep.
somebody looks at it and then they look at it and they go, okay. And we know that right now sellers are not really, they're not motivated to sell. Even whatever the amount of money it also means that they're gonna have to go buy something at that price point.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative tactic? Well, to go to your point about the hero's journey, uh, you're not the hero, you're the Sherpa. So who did you Sherpa? What just happened in a home sale that is the other, maybe more compelling story that I can see myself in as the customer? Well, what about the story of the Pantanas? What was Jason? What's your wife's name?
Alyssa.
Alyssa. Jason and Alyssa needed to sell their home. because this is what their journey is leading them toward. Their two daughters are fighting, and they're in the same room, and they're 12, and they need their own, whatever the journey is.
Sure.
Why can't the postcard take me, Marc Davison, into the Pantana's life,
Mm.
and what you did as the agent to get the Pantanas across the journey to the other side? Because then I'm reading it going, you know what? I'm just like the Pantanas. I got the same problem.
Mm.
I need a bigger house. And
Mm.
I didn't think that I could sell my home and get another home. And like by reading that story, I now feel more empowered that I
That's
can
right.
do that. Who was that realtor that did that? Like, you can build better brand and better attention to yourself and higher regard and higher respect by
Mm.
doing what every other brand does, is bring the listener, the viewer, the watcher into a storyline that they can see themselves in.
Well, and I
Um,
think therein lies the real truth. You think about your value proposition, it's sometimes hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. What is my value prop? But it seems as if you're asking more questions related to what are the stories that inspire me and my customers? And what can I glean from that? And you start thinking about the external of it, thinking about your customers and making it about them. I think you'll work backwards pretty quickly into, well, what is the value I deliver in those moments? That
the
helps to facilitate those outcomes.
the world has just decided that the realtor's fee is not worth listing a home and putting a sign in front of the yard,
Mm.
because it's not. But that's not where the agent's value is. But yet the agents never tell that story. So the world has come to a conclusion based upon everything that everybody's been, a market trend report. I get an email with a bunch of charts and graphs that make no sense, that confuse me, and there's like no real deep explanation as to, forget all this stuff. Here's what this means for you right now. Don't sell your home or whatever. Like, actually tell me a story. You know, I thought about this too during our call, but like, if I were a realtor, because I'm a brand guy, so I'm wired to like ask certain types of questions.
Sure.
If I were listing your home, the first question I would ask you is, can you describe where in this home you've had your most special moment and why?
Mm.
Like, where do you feel you're the most you in this home? What's going on
I
here?
love that question.
Right?
Love
Because
that.
once I start surfacing that, that's selling a 3 bed, 2 bath, 25. That's just a thing.
Transactional.
Nobody, yeah, it's nobody buys a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, 2,500 square foot. People walk through properties. You know what they're looking for? They're looking for that moment. Beautiful. I mean, everybody is looking for proof of their belief system. If you're following politics, the current president and the past president are both, every single movement they make is analyzed through the lens of who you like and who you don't like. None of
Yeah.
them, none of them can just, none of them can get through a day where we're not, where people are not like, oh look, he stumbled, so he must have dementia, or look, he said this, he must be lying. Like, we're creating our own belief systems
It's
based upon.
confirmation bias.
So like the world is kind of like, the world has been invited into a discussion around real estate agents. We have to be
Mhm.
acknowledged of that. So like everything that you do that supports their belief. So I'm going to leave your audience. I just want this reverberating in their head.
Yeah. Drop the
And I want
mic.
your audience to be my audience, because we're both, and I want my audience to be your audience. Like, we're all trying to help you with the same exact set of thinkings. If you say, but I should be in my video, the word I and me just happened in that sentence. And that should be the reason to not do it, because they don't need to see you. They don't want to see you. They want to see themselves. So if your incessant need is to be front and center, your whole thing is about you.
Mm.
And then you're missing fine, go do it. But you're not creating branding, you're not creating brand, and you're not activating the benefits of brand building. If you're sucking up all of, I love your term filibustering. I always say, if you're sucking up all the air,
Yeah.
uh, there's no air for me. And so, I don't know. You look at any. any I don't know, Subaru, right? Subaru. There's a car and it's driving through a place and it stops and somebody takes out a tent from the trunk and sets up a tent and is camping and watching the sunset. That's me doing that. That is the hero journey. It's not the guy that owns Subaru. He's not driving around his own Subaru, telling you
Hmm.
about the sun, showing you how to set up a tent. Like, it can be incredibly empowering to get behind the camera and let spokespeople or whatever, like for every single tactic you do, there's probably a better way that you can do that than you're likely thinking. And this is why you need, like, have creative teams, use creative teams. Like, just don't react and do. You need to think and strategize is the best. Uh,
Totally. And I think one of the takeaways I would have too is, and then probably got to wrap because I'm actually late for my next meeting at the moment and I've used up your time. But I think asking yourself why am I doing this? For what purpose? Why does it have to be me? Could it be anything else? What would make it better? Who does this serve? Asking those questions with an open-handed mentality of, to use your words from before, you described me as open-minded, which I really appreciated that attribute. I wear that with a badge of honor. I do. And I think for everybody to be more open-minded about clarifying the reasons why you're doing anything. Why are you not in this video? Why are you in this video? And being able to align that with either it is or it isn't in alignment with your brand. I was thinking about something I heard the other day. I can't remember who said it. They're talking about why businesses have value proposition. Excuse me, why businesses have core values
wait,
and how much time.
Before you go, you mentioned something that we were discussing off camera.
Yeah, yeah.
So your audience doesn't have context, I don't think. But I was describing you to you earlier, uh, and I used terms like open-minded,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and or maybe it was during this video. I don't
We
remember.
were on. We were filming. Yeah, they caught it, I think.
Yeah, but like that is not something I just said as a nice compliment. I've been watching you and listening to you for like 3 years now since we met, and the constant evolution of your knowledge. You're constantly switching up your strategies and tactics based on the moment, is telling me that like you continually reach places where you realize the thinking that you've had up until now needs to change because something's happened and I need new formulas. I need better information. It's like you're literally executing on the brand elements that you have. And I think that is a powerful takeaway for the audience to like reach back into that bag of stuff that they have and make
Right.
sure that they're putting out. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like,
No, no,
I
no. I love it, man. I do. And I got to tell you, like every time I talk to you, and if I could be so candid to say it, I like talking to you because you get such an amazing perceptive insight that is typically thought beyond. Like I never thought of it that way. Every time I talk to you, there's at least one or two moments of I never saw it that way. And sometimes your observations hurt, but they are always given in the spirit of improvement and to the benefit of everybody. So I find you to be one of the most constructive conversations I'll ever have. And I
I
think
get
right now, when you look at what's happening in the space, that's what we all need is more constructive dialogue about how should you be responding in a way that builds up, not tears down, makes new, not tries to preserve old broken. How do we move forward in the
yeah,
context of all the change right now? And I think, I think you've just been so useful. So I'll just wrap it up with this. Where can
okay.
they connect with you? What should be their next step to connecting with you?
Well, I'm easy to reach, so you can hand out my cell number, my email address. You know, we have an agency. We're not accessible to everybody. You know, there's a cost to hiring the agency, but we do beautiful design work. We're the
Yeah.
best at it, and designing identities and taking your identity and having it reflect your brand vibe changes everything. I can't tell you what a difference it makes when you pop a sign out or hand somebody something with your identity on it and it's engineered beautifully. Not what AI can do or Fiverr can do.
Sure.
That quick Canva stuff. That's generic. Uh, if you care about your brand and get it designed right, it makes a huge difference. We have a membership. Like join the group because we are publishing every month we are we are surveying consumers at the deepest level to get to them to tell us how they feel about everything real estate. We take that information, we provide it to members, along with a package of advertisements and marketing and messaging that you can create to target where people are at. So you get the research and then you get the output. We also have a great Facebook community where we're sharing. I'm posting in there every other day about something to think about where I'm, doing my thing, challenging whatever. 1000watt.net. Just go to the website and navigate easily around our stuff. Um, and, I have your people in my, one of my favorite people in the world, Dwayne Carpenter, is like,
Oh yeah.
He's always showing me things. What do you think? How can I make this better? I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do, but check with Jason.
Well, and I always say, what did Mark say whenever I'm talking to him?
I'm always like, double check with him because like strategy and tactic, they go hand in hand.
Totally.
And just like this, there's a saying like the moment makes the woman, the moment makes the man. It's the moment. We're in a moment. You got to understand the moment and then look at what am I doing to take. There is so much you can do right now. Tom and you guys are all about this is the moment when you can own the market. This is the moment when you can
I call it, it's an obstacle opportunity. Hardships can create opportunities. And right now there's an obstacle opportunity in front of you. And I would say take it, seize it, leverage it, and do it for what's better for you, for your brand, for your community, and all the above.
I have a client right now who is so busy that he's put a hold on work so that he can hire more people. He's a team.
Yeah.
He's not calling me, telling me things are dried up. He's just getting more market share because this guy is his brand. I'll give you some hints. He sells homes behind gated communities. He's built this whole brand around the benefit of living inside of a community that's gated and guarded and
That's so
HOA.
interesting.
And like he is selling this idyllic life for people who are why I would never live in an HOA. It's not for me. But
Right?
it's like if you're looking for that, he's become the brand you go to. It's in his name
That's so
too.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's his name, and he asked me, should he change the name? And I said, no, your name is synonymous with guard gated communities in Las Vegas. Don't change anything. Just keep making it about the communities and
Right.
about beyond the gates. And even
Right.
his logo, we designed his logo to be behind gates. It's the storytelling of the brand. So I wish everybody great luck. Don't freak out. This is a wonderful moment, really, if you take advantage of it. And
I
listen to
agree.
everything Jason says. That's all I
And
want.
vice versa. Mark, thank you so much for being on today. This has been a worthy of the time. I know it's a longer episode. I'm so grateful for everybody who listened or watched through the duration because you're the ones who got the right optics, the right thinking to level up your brands, level up the story, level up yourselves. Until next week, this is This Week in Marketing.